To new beginnings, Marissa said, lifting her glass with a polished smile. I smiled back, though something in her voice felt off, forced, rehearsed. Still, I clinked my glass to hers and took a sip. The wine hit my tongue with a bitter bite, then slid down with an odd warmth that wasn't entirely pleasant. Too sharp, almost metallic. Not the full-bodied red she always preferred. I swallowed it anyway. By the time I set the glass down, my throat tingled not in the way fine wine should, but as if I'd inhaled something wrong. I reached for my napkin, coughed once, then twice. My fingers brushed the edge of the table and I realized they were trembling. Neil, her husband, caught my eye from across the candles. He didn't blink, just sat there watching. Not out of concern, but something colder. Calculating. Mom Marissa's hand settled on my shoulder. Her voice was light, but her eyes scanned my face too quickly. You're shaking. Maybe it's too warm in here. Why don't you lie down for a bit? I tried to speak, but nodded instead. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with something unsaid. I glanced at the bottle on the sideboard, but the label had been turned away. I just need some water, I murmured, pushing gently from the chair. As I walked toward the kitchen, my chest tightened with each step. Not panic, at least not yet, but something else. A quiet alarm in my gut. My shoes clicked softly on the tile floor. Behind me, their voices returned to laughter too quickly, too loudly, as if my presence had been a disruption. The kitchen was spotless, glowing under warm pendant lights. I placed both hands on the counter, steadying myself, waiting for the dizziness to pass. It didn't. I gripped the edge of the marble counter, the coolness grounding me. The kitchen sparkled stainless steel appliances, spotless tile, everything in its place like a showroom. It was beautiful, yes, but sterile. It didn't smell like food or warmth. It didn't smell like family. My gaze drifted to the corner windows. Beyond them, the backyard was lit with string lights. A patio set gleamed beneath them, unused. I remembered the small backyard Marissa grew up in, where she'd chase fireflies while I grilled chicken on an old dented barbecue. I remembered the boat too. Her father's pride, our escape. I sold it to help with the down payment on this house. They never talk about that. Not anymore. The counter was cluttered, but not with cooking. Unopened bills, fancy receipt slips from home decor stores, and something else, an envelope tucked beneath a catalog. My name was on it. I picked it up. Heart ticking louder now. The logo on the front stopped me. Harrington Medical Systems. That name shouldn't be familiar, but it was. I hadn't had a policy with them since I left St. Jude's 15 years ago. The envelope wasn't sealed. My hands moved without thinking, sliding the letter out. The paper was crisp, recently printed. I scanned the lines, quickly enrollment verification patient name, Clarice Halden. Policy status pending. Pending, I hadn't applied for anything. A sound from the dining room jolted me, laughter rising again like a rehearsed chorus. I looked toward the hallway. No one followed me. I turned back to the stack of papers. Just beneath the envelope sat something else, thicker, glossier. A single sheet of insurance paperwork poked from under a Williams-Sonoma catalog. I reached for it, my fingers cold. My fingers moved stiffly as I slid the document from beneath the catalog. I knew the format before I read a word. The layout was unmistakable standard hospital consent. Patient Clarice Halden. Status pending signature. Procedure cardiac evaluation. End-of-life palliative support. My breath caught. I hadn't been to a hospital in years, not even for a checkup. Behind it, another sheet, heavier paper, official font. I stared at it without blinking. A life insurance policy newly issued. Policy amount $200,000. Beneficiary Marissa Halden. I swayed slightly and gripped the counter again. My name. My death. Their payday. I let the papers fall back onto the counter, needing something real to hold. My gaze landed on a small bottle beside the sink, almost hidden behind a bowl of citrus fruit. It was glass, clear, nearly empty. The label had peeled slightly, but the text was still legible: sedative. 20 ml. Same type we use to calm combative patients at St. Jude's. Not available over the counter. Not something you happen to have in your kitchen. I felt my knees buckle. I caught the counter just in time. From the dining room, Neil's voice floated, in casual, too casual. "Everything okay, Mom?" I swallowed the rising acid in my throat and forced my voice steady. "Not yet." I let go of the counter. They thought I'd be too slow to notice, too trusting to question, too old to matter. I opened the cabinet above the sink for a glass, filling it with cold water, sipping slowly. I needed to think, not panic. They had planned this, calculated it, signed papers for it, and they thought I wouldn't find out. The glass of water trembled in my hand, but not from weakness. It was memory. Every breath seemed to pull me backward into the years when everything I did revolved around Marissa. After her father's accident, I'd told myself I could handle it. One income, one child, one purpose. I sold our small house and moved into a one-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital where I worked. My days blurred into endless shifts, double and triple, sometimes going 30 hours without rest. My back ached. My hands cracked from antiseptic, but I kept going. Every paycheck went to her education fund. When the university raised tuition, I skipped my own doctor visits to make up the difference. When my car broke down, I walked to work through Oregon rain for 6 weeks until I could afford repairs. Every sacrifice felt worth it because she was the reason. When she graduated medical school, I cried so hard I couldn't see the diploma through my tears. "You did it," I'd said. She hugged me stiffly, already taking a call from her residency director. I told myself it was pride keeping her distant, not indifference. But distance grew. Calls faded. Holidays became the only time I saw her. Then came the withdrawals from my account, small at first, then larger. "I'll pay you back, Mom," she said once. Distracted, her voice, the same one she used with her patients. Professional, distant. I never asked again. "You don't audit love. You trust it." And for years I convinced myself she was just busy, that I'd done my job as a mother too well, made her independent, untethered. But looking at those papers now, at the forged forms, I understood what I'd actually built. Not independence, entitlement. And it was time to stop pretending I didn't see it. I walked back into the dining room slowly, one hand brushing the wall like I needed it. My face felt pale, but I forced calm into every step. No one noticed the difference except Marissa. She was already out of her seat, meeting me halfway. "You okay?" Her voice was sugar-sweet, but her fingers gripped my arm a second longer than necessary. Searching, measuring. "Just low sugar," I murmured. "I think I skipped breakfast." She gave a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You should have told me. You've always been terrible about eating on time." I sat, pretending to steady myself with the edge of the table, careful not to look too aware. My pulse drummed in my wrist. I counted the beats. Not from fear, but to keep myself from lashing out. Neil poured another glass of wine. "Here, this'll help," he said, almost amused. The same bottle. The same label turned conveniently away. I nodded, fingers curling around the stem without lifting it. Across the table, Marissa leaned in as Neil whispered something in her ear. Her laugh was too quick, too high. I glanced down at my plate, barely touched. Turkey, cranberry sauce, roasted vegetables arranged like a magazine spread. I used to make meals like this. When Marissa was little, we'd host neighbors in our tiny duplex kitchen, paper napkins folded like fans. She always asked for extra marshmallows on the sweet potatoes. Now, here I was, an accessory at my own daughter's table. I smiled just enough to meet her eyes when she looked at me again. I wanted her to believe I didn't know, that her plan was invisible, that I was slipping just enough for her not to worry. But I'd memorized everything, the placement of the vial, the papers, the way her voice changed when she thought I wasn't listening. I was pretending to be tired, pretending to be confused, but I wasn't the one playing games. I was the one keeping score. I pushed back from the table, gently murmuring something about needing air. Marissa nodded her hand, brushing mine again, too casually. Don't stay out long. It's freezing. She didn't follow me. She didn't need to. The front door clicked shut behind me, and I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The cold air burned through my lungs. It was sharp, honest nothing, like the artificial warmth inside. I walked to the edge of the porch, my fingers already working their way into my coat pocket. The phone was cold, too metal against skin. I unlocked it, tapped the emergency dial. The ring only lasted once. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Clarice Halden, I said, voice steady enough to scare even me. I believe I've been drugged at my daughter's house. There's a vial on the kitchen counter. There are forged documents in a folder. Life insurance. Hospital consent. My name's on them all. There was a pause, then a calm voice. Can you stay outside, Ms. Halden? Help is on the way. Are you in immediate danger? No, I said, but I'm not stepping back inside. I leaned against the porch rail, heart thudding, not from fear, but from clarity. Through the window, I saw Neil tilt his head back and laugh. Marissa checked her watch, then her phone. Her shoulders relaxed. They thought the sedative was working. They thought I was fading. They thought I wouldn't fight back. Somewhere in the distance, I heard it, faint but approaching. Sirens. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there watching the two of them through glass, wondering when they stopped seeing me as human and started seeing me as a number. The lights rounded the corner, blue and red, flashing across the bare trees. And still, they hadn't noticed. The paramedics were professional kind. They didn't ask many questions, just helped me into the ambulance, checked my vitals, slipped the oxygen tube beneath my nose. I answered what I needed to, close my eyes when I could, and let the cold hospital gown replace the chill outside. Blood work came back fast. Toxicology confirmed what I already knew, traces of a powerful sedative mixed with alcohol. Not enough to kill me, not yet. Just enough to confuse me, discredit me, ease me out of the picture. By the time I was transferred from observation to a private room, 2 detectives were waiting. They were polite but direct. We've collected several items from your daughter's home, one said. There's a bottle 20 ml sedative almost empty, unprescribed. We found a folder of documents in the kitchen. You're listed as the patient on a hospital admission form. And the life insurance policy, $1.2 million I finished for him. He raised an eyebrow. You knew I used to administer that sedative. I know its smell, the viscosity, the way it lingers on the tongue. I knew the moment I swallowed. He exchanged a glance with his partner. You work in medicine. I did. 42 years. I paused. This wasn't a mistake. It was dosage. Neil denied everything, claimed the documents were planning tools just in case something happened, said the vial was for anxiety for their dog, though they didn't have one. Marissa was colder. Her voice was smooth, impersonal. My mother has a history of paranoia. She forgets things, mixes up stories. I told her to lie down. She refused. She's always had control issues. But the signatures on the insurance forms were clean. The policy had been active for 3 months. Premiums nearly paid in full. They didn't need a confession. They had intent. I lay in the hospital bed, full in my arm, watching the detective flip through a folder that used to belong to me. He looked up again. This had to hurt, he said softly. I didn't answer. I just waited for the paperwork to become evidence. The news spread fast. Too fast. Local doctor and husband charged in attempted homicide of elderly mother. My face wasn't on the front page, but my name was. So was hers. People stared at me differently after that. In the grocery store, at the bank. Some crossed to the other side of the aisle. Others gave those half smiles that said, "I don't know what to say, so I'll pretend I didn't see you." Even old colleagues from St. Jude's looked past me, as if catching my eye would implicate them somehow. Maybe they didn't want to admit someone from our world, our profession, was capable of what Marissa had done. But I didn't shrink. I went to every hearing, my coat buttoned high, my cane tapping softly against the courthouse floor. I sat in the front row. Never missed a day. Marissa and Neil sat across the room with their lawyers wearing suits that made them look smaller than they were. I barely recognized the girl I raised in the woman who wouldn't meet my eyes. The prosecutor asked me to take the stand. I rose slowly, every joint stiff with memory, not age. They handed me the hospital consent form, the one with my name forged neatly on the signature line. "Can you read this aloud?" he asked. I did. Word for word. Procedure date name. When I reached the final line, I looked directly at Marissa. "They thought I'd die quietly," I said. They were wrong. The room held its breath. The defense didn't object. They didn't need to. My words had already settled. Not as rage, not even as grief, but as fact. And once truth is spoken like that, it doesn't leave room for anything else. The jury never looked at her the same way again. The verdict came down on a Thursday morning. 10 years each. Attempted homicide fraud, falsified documents. The courtroom was silent, except for the shuffle of papers and the low voice of the judge reading the sentence. Marissa didn't cry. Neil didn't speak. I watched them from the front row, hands folded around my cane. When the bailiff led them out, neither looked back. It was almost a relief to see the door close between us. Afterward, the prosecutor handed me a form to sign acknowledgement of victim restitution. I stared at the blank line, then slid it back. "I don't want their money," I said. It was never about that. Instead, I transferred my own savings, every cent I hadn't spent on her education or the house, to a small women's clinic in Portland. They provided free prenatal care for single mothers, the kind of women I used to treat on night shifts when funding was short. I didn't tell anyone. The check cleared quietly. Reporters waited outside the courthouse, microphones, ready, cameras pointed. They wanted a quote. They wanted a headline. "Do you forgive your daughter?" someone shouted. I stopped just long enough to answer. "Forgiveness isn't denial," I said. "It's distance." That night I returned to my apartment. Small, plain, quiet. I made a cup of coffee, turned off the lights, and sat by the window. Outside, snow began to fall. The kind that softened every sound, blanketing the street in white. I watched the flakes drift past the glass, each one erasing a little more of the noise that had filled my life for so long. The television murmured in the background, the news cycle already moving on. But I stayed there, still. The steam from my coffee rising like breath in the cold air. The city lights blurred through the frost, and for the first time in months, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like recovery, and in that stillness, I began to wonder what I would do next. It was spring when I returned to the classroom. Not a full job, just a few hours a week at the local nursing program, offering lectures on geriatric care, and something the syllabus never included: how to recognize abuse that doesn't leave bruises. I stood before rows of fresh, eager faces, most of them no older than Marissa was when she first said she wanted to be a doctor. Some took notes with precision. Others just listened, eyes wide, unsure how this gray-haired woman knew so much about pain that hides behind manners and clean linens. I didn't tell them my story, not in full. I didn't have to. I used case studies. I shared patterns. I asked, what would you notice if a patient said they were just tired all the time? Or, What if a sedative shows up in their system, but no prescription does? The silence that followed those questions always told me enough. On my desk, I kept one photo in a simple frame. Marissa, at 6 years old, holding a plastic stethoscope to her teddy bear's chest, grinning as if she'd already saved 100 lives. I never hid the picture. I never explained it either. Some students asked about the girl in the photo. I always said the same thing. That's someone I used to believe could do no harm. Today I looked at her smile for a long moment before sliding the frame into the drawer. Then I turned back to my students and closed the lesson. Medicine can save lives. I told them, my voice steady, but so can truth. Don't be afraid to believe what your instincts whisper before anyone else does. They nodded, some more serious than before. I locked the classroom door behind me, the keys light in my palm. Outside, the wind was warm. The streets hummed with late-day quiet. I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I wasn't. For the first time in a long while, there was no fear left in my pulse.